Everything I am about to share with you has never been presented on YouTube in this way before, and it contains information that has been passed down from generation to generation in my family. Now, I am going to share it with you. If you are tired of feeling limited, tired of living with fear, anxiety, or hopelessness, if you are merely coping with this reality that has been painted around you, this video will change your life. I will scientifically explain why you are the way you are. From this moment on, I want you to imagine that your mind and body work as one integrated system. This system carries records that, most of the time, were not consciously chosen by you. They are like apps you never installed, but that still consume energy and determine the way you perceive and react to the world. Since childhood, you have been conditioned by family members, teachers, neighbors, and other authority figures. They showed you, directly or indirectly, what was allowed, what was forbidden, what meant affection, rejection, achievement, or loss. These lessons, whether pleasant or painful, were recorded in your subconscious mind as codes that shape your present. Think of your mind as a brand new phone. When it comes out of the box, it is clean and ready for use. But as you install apps and allow permissions, the phone begins to take on a specific profile of use. The same happens with you. Every experience, good or bad, was like an app added to your system. A friendship that ended abruptly, an accident that left scars, the loss of a loved one, or even the constant feeling of not being heard at home. All of these created emotional installations that remain active even today, often without your awareness. Now imagine a person who grew up in an environment of lack. Maybe it wasn't just food that was scarce, but also affection, recognition, and safety. That child, once grown, often carries the perception that the world is a place where something is always missing. It might be money, it might be love, it might be stability. What began as a concrete experience becomes a lens that distorts the future. The person believes they do not deserve prosperity, that real relationships don't last, or that happiness is always temporary. This filter is the direct result of subconscious programming built early in life. But there is something even deeper. Not everything we carry comes from our own experiences. There is a science called epigenetics, which studies how external factors can activate or silence genes over time. This means traumas, behavior patterns, and even talents can be passed through generations. Perhaps that inexplicable fear of public speaking, or that natural talent for drawing or singing, did not arise only from personal experiences, but from invisible inheritances transmitted through your lineage. Researchers have demonstrated this clearly in animal experiments. In one study, for example, small electric shocks were associated with the scent of a specific plant. Once conditioned, the animals developed a strong aversion to that aroma. The most astonishing part is that the offspring of those animals, who had never been shocked, also reacted with fear to the same smell. This shows the trauma was not only in the individual's memory but became inscribed in the code passed on. This same mechanism may explain why certain social groups still carry fears or resistances that seem collective. It is not only about stories being told, but records that remain alive in the body and mind of future generations. It is as if each descendant inherits not only the physical traits of their ancestors but also emotional fragments that influence their behavior. These programs, whether acquired through direct experience or inherited from family, act like invisible filters. They influence who you connect with, how you spend money, which opportunities you notice or ignore, and even how you react to challenges. Without realizing it, we often repeat the patterns of our parents or grandparents, not because we want to, but because there is an internal script pushing us that way. The good news is that these programs can be identified and reframed. The first step is to become aware of them. It is like being inside a play without realizing you are acting out a role written by someone else. The moment you become aware of the script is the moment you can begin to improvise, change lines, and even write a new story. Next comes modifying behavior. It is not enough to just think differently, you must act differently, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. If the old pattern was avoiding risks out of fear of failure, the new behavior may be taking small steps towards something new, even if anxiety arises. This consistent practice sends signals to the mind and body that a new path is being created. The third stage is repetition. Creating new mental pathways is like opening a trail in the forest. At first it is difficult, full of branches and obstacles. But the more often you walk down that trail, the clearer and more accessible it becomes. The same happens with your thoughts and emotions. Each time you insist on choosing differently, even against old programming, the stronger the new version of yourself becomes. Science has already shown that the brain does not clearly distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. That is why vividly visualizing a desired future, feeling the emotions it would bring, and remaining present in that state can rewire your nervous system. Gradually, your mind and body stop living in the past and begin to act as if the future is already happening. When this process is consolidated, you not only free yourself from inherited patterns and accumulated pain, but you also create space to live a life aligned with what you truly want. And by doing so, you don't just transform yourself, you break cycles, heal wounds that were not only yours, and offer future generations a lighter, freer, more abundant path. Cherry Blossom, the offspring of rats, were extremely sensitive and traumatized by the smell. This experiment shows that the trauma the male rat experienced was passed to its offspring, and the young inherited that trauma. Now you might be thinking, well, those are rats. Let me paint the picture more clearly for you. There is this widespread limiting belief, 615, that African Americans are afraid of water and cannot swim. Why does this happen? The reason is that, if you go back to the time of slavery, when humans owned other humans, slave owners conditioned their slaves to fear water. They abused them physically, mentally, and verbally to instill fear of rivers and oceans around them. The goal was to prevent slaves from escaping, but this programming conditioned them to truly believe, 651, that water would kill them. This same programming was also used with dogs. Dogs were trained to hunt down, corner, and terrorize slaves. And when it was finally time to escape slavery, many were forced to cross those same waters, the very waters they had been taught to fear. The experience was so traumatic that it was transmitted through generations, and remnants of it still exist today. These programs don't just stay in the past, they settle in our subconscious and silently shape how we live. Every choice we make, from the smallest to the most complex, passes through invisible filters built during childhood, through beliefs, through limits we inherited, and through traumas we never resolved. What is most remarkable is that these patterns can remain dormant and only reveal themselves when triggered by external circumstances. A common example is found in families with a history of addiction. Imagine a household where the grandfather was dependent on alcohol. Not all the grandchildren will carry that addiction, but one might, at a certain point in life, after loss or emotional pressure, awaken that genetic inclination. It is as though the program had been waiting for a specific trigger. Similarly, some neurological conditions, like anxiety disorders or seizures, may appear later in life, even though the predisposition was there from birth. It is not only about repeating abusive behaviors but also about carrying the emotional vulnerability of those who were victims. The invisible marks shape the way we trust others, how we respond to affection, and even how we perceive ourselves. It is like wearing distorted lenses, created by experiences we did not choose, but that were handed down as silent inheritance. And this point is crucial. If we don't recognize these programs, they eventually become automatic behaviors, then habits, and finally personality traits. Think of someone who suffered deep heartbreak. Instead of healing the wound, they carry the fear of betrayal into every new relationship. Over time, they begin acting controlling, distrustful, even hostile. The initial trauma becomes their identity. It is like walking through life blindfolded. You try to move forward, but your limited vision makes you stumble into the same obstacles. Opportunities arrive, but you cannot see them because the filters block any possibility of growth. This can show up in toxic friendships, impulsive financial decisions, or even professional choices that sabotage your own success. Once, during my work in healthcare, I accompanied a middle-aged patient who perfectly illustrated this process. He had lost his job months before being admitted and, ever since, he repeated the same angry phrases against his boss every single day. It was as if that episode was frozen in time. His identity shrank to that of a man wronged, and anyone who tried to advise him was immediately seen as an enemy. That cycle trapped him in a constant narrative of pain, unable to move forward. Perhaps you, watching this, have felt the same, the sense of always being on guard, waiting to be hurt again. The body reacts with tremors, the heart races, and the mind invents scenarios that never actually happened. This state of survival becomes a psychological prison, because the initial trauma was never resolved, it only changed shape. That is why understanding these programs is vital. They are not just memories of what happened, but active forces shaping our present. They are patterns inherited, internalized, or awakened throughout life. Recognizing them is not easy, but it is the first step to prevent them from defining who we are or limiting what we can achieve. We need to uninstall these programs, so how do we do that? First, I must explain why it is so hard to let go of emotions, to let go of those beliefs. There is a 3-step process, and most of us remain stuck in step 1. The first step is thought. The second is conscious action. The third is embodiment, when what you practice has already become part of who you are. The problem is that many people never move past the first stage. We spend days thinking about how to change, planning in our minds, but rarely transform that into real movement. The result is predictable: without new actions, there are no new outcomes. You must understand that the mind speaks through thoughts, while the body communicates through emotions. Often, the body takes control because emotions carry immediate, visceral power. When provoked or triggered, we almost always react emotionally instead of rationally. This means that if your goal is to feel wholeness, prosperity, or love, you cannot remain trapped in survival mode, which only reinforces scarcity and fear. The first step toward creating an abundant life is breaking free from automatic repetition. These mental loops keep us stuck in the same scenarios, the same excuses, the same mistakes. Once we train our body to consciously experience joy, confidence, and safety that our mind already understands intellectually, we begin to align reason with emotion. Science shows that we generate between 60,000 and 70,000 thoughts per day. The astonishing part is that 90% of them are exact copies of the ones we had yesterday. This means that if we believe our reality is shaped by our thoughts, living inside the same mental box condemns us to repeated results. Nothing changes because we continue feeding the same patterns. Now imagine this cycle: the same thoughts lead to the same choices sustain the same habits build identical experiences, and those experiences reinforce the emotions we already know. The circle closes and locks our identity in place. That is why change requires breaking this flow. The way we think, feel, and act defines our personality. And that personality, combined with environment, is what determines our personal reality. Therefore, if someone wants to transform their world, they must first transform themselves. It is necessary to examine which beliefs and which emotions still belong to the past, and consciously choose which ones will belong in the future. This process can be compared to becoming the observer of yourself. The first step is to notice, in real time, when the old program is trying to take over. It is like sitting in a theater watching the movie of your own life. Instead of acting on autopilot, you step back and observe: this is just a conditioned thought. This is not me. A simple example: when someone loses control under the influence of alcohol, and the next day friends report behaviors the person doesn't even remember. That information works like a mirror, leading them to reflect: I need to take better care of myself. Awareness of behavior opens the door to change. The same applies to our daily emotions. If I can observe them without merging with them, I have already taken the first step toward reprogramming. The second step is consciously modifying actions. This means making decisions different from the usual ones, even if small. If the impulse is to react with anger, the deliberate choice can be to take a deep breath and respond calmly. That new gesture plants a seed of transformation. The third and most difficult step is consistent repetition. The brain will try to trick you with familiar thoughts: this is too hard, you can't do it, or just start next week. The body will also protest, as it is addicted to the chemicals of old emotions. This resistance is natural. Discomfort is part of growth. Stepping into unknown territory always feels strange. It is like learning a new language or playing an instrument. At first, everything feels forced. But with daily practice, the new behavior stops feeling artificial and becomes second nature. Therefore, if we want to break limiting beliefs and rebuild our lives, we must embrace this transition period. Observe old programs without identifying with them, act differently even when it feels odd, and persist until the change is consolidated into our identity. The key is separating who you are from what you feel. You are not the fear, the anger, or the insecurity that arises. You are the awareness observing those emotions. When that awareness grows stronger, you stop being a hostage of the past and truly begin creating a new future. This process is not simple, but it is transformative. Those who choose to endure the inevitable discomfort of the beginning discover a life of abundance, authenticity, and freedom. It is proof that our thoughts don't just describe the world, they build it. The game is to teach your body emotionally what the future will be like before the real event happens. The truth is, your brain does not know the difference between past, present, and future. That is why if you recall something from the past, something emotional or upsetting, and you begin to feel the emotion rising, your body heats up, your blood boils, and you begin reliving it, because your mind doesn't understand it happened last year. It begins to seem like it is happening right now. When you dedicate yourself to training your mind to imagine new possibilities, you break away from old memories and give your body the chance to experience new sensations. With each positive visualization, new pathways are created, new connections appear, and your internal chemistry transforms, bringing clarity and readiness for new actions. Small choices become new behaviors, which then generate entirely different experiences, opening space for a renewed reality. When I truly understood this, I realized much of my suffering came from interpreting others' actions only through the lens of my own pain. I began to see that each person reacts according to the traumas and stories they carry, and this completely changed how I related to them. I gained more empathy, became more patient, and even found harmony in situations that once drained me. This new perspective brought me peace, prosperity, and new opportunities, simply because I stopped imprisoning myself inside the limits I had created. I hope this content inspires you to observe the patterns you have been repeating and that may be blocking your evolution. If your desire is to overcome the marks of the past, to build a life of achievement, or even to leave a legacy for your family, understanding how internal programs and the influence of epigenetics work will be a turning point. Life becomes lighter when we know we have the power to reprogram who we are. I would love for you to share your thoughts or reflections, because this will help this message reach others who are still trapped in old suffering. If just one person frees themselves through this understanding, I will have fulfilled my purpose. If this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, because my mission is to help you become the version of yourself capable of attracting everything you desire.